Wingo.
Yeah, hello, Wingo.
You might notice we no Australian accent.
Yes, we're infiltrating this event, but it's fine because we're playing again an Australian game. It's fine. It's a good cause. I found this most via Dact, so if I don't think he's here right now, but anyone who knows Dact, good guy. Because I saw he was doing Sparrow for it, so that's cool. This is my first time doing any marathon run of any sort, so I'm hoping this will go pretty well. I don't see why it wouldn't. My practice runs have been going good recently. So I assume I just count down for time, probably. Just wait to make sure we're good on that before I start. I should have I should have saved my soda to open now so I could do that.
Sadly, Wingo, I do not have Pepsi cans at home right now. I have a 2-liter bottle that I've been rationing for the upcoming days.
Alright, so time will just be when I press A to continue here, or X rather. I don't know why it shows that. I'm on a PS4 controller, but so we'll do 3, 2, 1, go. So this first mission has a lot of stuff going on in it, so I'm not going to be able to really do much other than just explain what's happening as it happens. I'll explain some more base stuff about the run after. I'm going to assume most people here probably don't really know this game, because the majority of people I talk to ever have only heard of the first game and didn't really know there was even a sequel. Even though I think it's far superior, at least in terms of speedrunning.
Yeah, debatable.
Yeah, we can get into a debate about it, but the first game's a little more fun casually, but... So what I'm doing here first, you'll notice this is a combo counter happening when I'm killing enemies here. I'm trying to get to a 20 counter so I can get a lot of opals here. Because this very first mission is very important for routing, because you can see I have close to 1800 opals here, and that's actually pretty much perfect. I aim for around 1700, give or take. Opals are currency in the game. Use them to buy boomerangs and other similar things in the hub area. And since it's very easy to get a very high combo from those enemies there, it makes sense to optimize it as much as possible there so I don't have to get opals elsewhere. Other categories require almost perfect there, like leaving with 23 or 2400, and it's very hard to do. You see I did some movement over here to cause these NPCs to keep walking, because they kind of get stuck, because I go ahead of them too quick.
Not too far to the old barracks now.
Yeah. Most of the game is not this action heavy, like this first mission, so it's a pretty good way to start the run. Very, very fast paced. I've never tried to throw a boomerang before. It would probably not end well. I'd probably manage to get it to come back to me, but it would probably just hit me. But yeah, they're the primary weapon in the game here. There's all sorts of variety. There's like a smash ring, which can break stronger objects, a flame ring that's on fire. All sorts of varieties like that. In this run, I think we only buy technically 2. The third one's not really necessary, but it saves a little bit of time. Here I have a couple of visual cues here for this little cannon section to set up and hit these guys, because they always spawn in the same area. I haven't been doing very good with the visual cues recently, so hopefully it just goes alright this time. Right, that's good. Gotta wait a little bit for this guy. I've been having trouble with this one specifically. I'm like not aiming to the right enough, I think. I haven't done like consistent runs of this since earlier this year. I kind of just came back to it to de-rush for this, and I do want to start doing runs again anyways. So that should be good now. Can hit this guy a little better this time with some more aim to the right. Yeah, that's good. Ideally, I wouldn't run out of ammo during there, so I don't have to wait for it to refill. So I'm chasing after this person. This is actually one of the mini-bosses that we'll face later in our run. They're trying to break the boss from the first game out of prison up here. So we have to stop them.
Name's Fluffy, by the way.
Yes. And the boss from the first game and this game is both Boss Cass, who is a cassowary, pretty well named. Pretty standard platforming villain, honestly, just wants to take over the world, the usual stuff. I'm doing this fight badly. You can see there, actually, you can actually see it, that I had to punch a couple times for it to work. If you do a jump first and then punch in the air, it gets around that, and I just mess it up a couple times, so it's fine. So this is the hub area. This area here doesn't really have a whole lot in it, except for 1 or 2 NPCs. They get submissions later on that'll do. The majority of the reason we're here is going through this area to get to the actual town, which has all sorts of shops, more collectibles, a couple missions. I'm not buying anything yet, because I don't have anywhere near enough opals to get stuff, and I don't need to anyways. Here, I'm gonna kind of jump on this to get up to this part of town a little bit easier. Normally you have to walk all the way over there and come around. That was something I didn't realize at first, because on console version of this game, there's a fence there that blocks it. But on PC, it's able to load these areas pretty much all at once, so it doesn't have any reason to be blocked off, so we can do that. So I just said PC, this is a Steam port of the game that was, I think, back in 2016 maybe. Might have been a little earlier. But the developers, Chrome Studios, who are Australian, they decided to start porting the games onto Steam, and they're very good ports, very good looking, they play very well.
They're more like remasters than just ports.
I was hoping, so there's a glitch here that happens sometimes with these cars where they kind of float in the air after you do that, and I was hoping they would happen, but it didn't. That's bad. Oh well.
Yeah, the Steam ports have very nice quality of life improvements and graphical improvements and all that stuff. It was a really good experience to play those games again.
So, as you can see, we're in the sewers. We're here just to kill a bunch of crocodiles that are infesting. But more importantly, we get to meet this lovely person here, Goo Steve. I'll let him talk.
What species is he again?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Stegosaurus?
Oh, right. How could I forget? So he's unique, but he's very loved. There's an entire category that just revolves around him. It's really great. He shows up 10 times on the run and he gives you opals if you listen to him. If you skip his cutscenes, you don't get any opals, but I don't know why you would ever skip them, because he has infinite wisdom. Love to hear his stories. We don't normally do any talking to him in any percent, but I put him as an incentive here. I was told we're just doing that anyways, and that is fine with me, because getting the opals from home actually gets a little bit of leeway in the routing that I otherwise wouldn't have, just to buy an extra boomerang at one point.
Kinda sad I won't get to hear Steve.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah, so as far as like what the game's actually about, since I haven't touched on that yet, we're trying to stop Boss Cass and his plans from trying to take over the world, like I mentioned. But the majority of the missions we're doing are kind of just day-to-day things like this, clearing the sewers from crocodile infestation, sometimes a little more serious things like rescuing people in like a forest, or saving people who are trapped underwater with a bunch of sharks, stuff like that. Basically acting as like a police force. So what I did here was actually something very subtle, called a boosted jump, where you can see if I do this little double jump, those little like motion blur things come up. And that's normally gliding, but if you do that at a good timing, and just do it very quickly, he'll get a little bit of extra height out of the double jump. Allows you to make a couple jumps onto ledges without having to do ledge grabs. It's pretty convenient on something like that, railing there. So the majority of missions, you can make the map big here, you can see there's a big overworld. You drive from mission to mission for the most part. This is the first mission out here where it's a movie set with a bunch of 2 actors who are being attacked by ninjas, and we have to just save them. I don't know why ninjas are attacking their movie set, but They spawn randomly, so for the most part I'm just trying to just keep up with them when they spawn and hit them as quick as possible. But I'm also trying to kill them ideally as close to each other as possible in time, so I can get 2 combos out of them, so I can get a little bit more opals. It's not as important here since I talked to Steve, so I have more opals than I need anyways, but normally I would be focusing on that a bit more. Biting kills him in 1 hit, which is a lot faster, so it's actually really cool that I got like 3 or 4 bites in a row there. Where's the last guy? There he is. So the missions that appear in each part of the game are the same every time. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, but if you were to actually check the call sheet, which is on the pause menu and it shows the available missions, you don't have to do them in the order they appear on there in any way, so like all the missions for this part of the game are in this little area of the map, and they show up by the colored stars. I don't necessarily have to do them even if they're not on the map yet, because they quote-unquote unlock an order, but you can do them in any order you want, which allows a little more flexibility with the routing, so we can just do them all in a line here. It doesn't really happen with these missions, but later on I'll be going to places that don't have any star happening on it, and I'll still be getting things done. Just a little bit of a weird jump there that you can kind of jump up the dirt there on the side. It saves time from having to walk around on some bridges. So these like long walking areas are originally, again, one of the things left over from console, because the GameCube, it was a GameCube era type of game, and it took time to load things. So that would kind of be a way for them to allow you to actually still be able to move and do things while it's loading the next mission area. But on PC, things load so quickly that it kind of is just really out of place to just have to walk ahead for no reason. So this is the first of many vehicle-type minigames, or little missions. Most of them are with the helicopter. There's a couple underwater with a submarine thing, but you can notice on the top right there's a fuel meter. I'm going to pick up a fuel drum here. It's good to pick this one up because it's about half empty now, and at the very end, when I get to the end of this little mission, I end up with just enough fuel to make it, which saves me from having to pick up 2 drums. I can pick up just that one and I'll be fine. So the purpose of this one is to pick up this TNT and just deliver it to a mining site, I believe it is. There's a couple of minor things I can do here to try and get a bit of a speed boost. Sometimes they don't work, sometimes they're really subtle, but you'll see here if it works. Yeah, you can see the helicopter got kind of like jutted forward a little bit. And one here, hopefully? Yeah. Very minor, but you can kind of take advantage of the momentum of the thing swinging underneath you and have it bump over some of the obstacles underneath to get a little bit of a speed boost forward. Or at the very least it looks like it's a speed boost. It's hard to really tell. There's one here as well that I just recently realized was like actually doable. Yeah, there we go. I haven't quite got that consistent yet, but so normally I only need 5,000 opals here. Clearly I'm well ahead of that thanks to talking to Steve. But normally that would be roughly what I'm looking for. And that Steve, I believe, only gives 1,000, so that means I'm like 300 opals more than I need, which is good. Obviously I want to be closer if I can, but that just means I did the intro pretty well. I got a good amount of opals out of there, and did pretty good with the ninjas as well. So right here is going to be the first boss. This first set of missions is definitely the fastest, because there's not that many. That's cool. So it's very hard to get that to actually land properly on the ground. Very often you overshoot it or you miss and the truck goes upside down. But that's twice in a row I've got that, which is pretty cool. This is Patsy, the first boss. He's has some weak spots on his head, then his tail, and then on top of himself later. Pretty simple, just hit him. There's a couple minor things I do to try and manipulate how he moves a little bit, just to make him not walk too much, but for the most part it's just pretty straightforward. I try to make sure that he doesn't run at me. I want him to do that kind of hop where he twists in the air. Because if he runs at you, you can get a hit on him pretty quickly, but then you have to wait for him for like 5 seconds for him to actually move again, and it's just a bit slower than just doing this. In this third phase, it's possible to get some early hits on him here before he does the jump and posing thing. It's very rare. I've only... oh, that's one actually, pretty much. Wasn't exactly what I was going for, but it's close enough. Not very common those happen, just because the hitbox is kind of glitchy. Okay, so, back in the hub now. We've got the second set of missions, very similar length. So here, we're going to buy the Thermo Bunyip, which we're not actually going to see in action for a little bit. And I'm not going to forget this mission like I did in practice earlier. So the Thermo Bunyip allows you to put out fires. There's a mission in the set that we're skipping, which I'll explain a little more about later, because it comes up more importantly in the next set of missions. But the boss mission in this requires use of it. So even though that's not for another little bit of time, we're not coming back to the town before then. So we do need to buy it now. These missions don't really have a whole lot going on in them. You can see the timer up there. I have to deliver food to... yeah, I got confused with the missions, but it's delivering food to a bunch of workers on a beach, which is not really an emergency if you ask me, but that's what we're here to do, so... So it feels kind of slow. Good.
It's just a prime example of people taking advantage of the system.
They know that we won't say no. So it feels kind of slow to be driving all the way over to the beach here just for this, but especially when you see that the green and the purple emissions are, like, I'm driving past them and they're what I'm doing next. But there's really no other way to go about doing this. I've tried every combination of doing this mission at the very beginning or at the very end are basically the only options, just because walking through the town takes so long. And this is just by far the only option that actually works and is still remotely fast. So now we have to drive pretty much back to the center of the map, to actually the light blue star. I actually missed that one. They better be a good lunch for all that I just did for them. Also, that was weird. I just got a thing that happens sometimes where moving and the car will just like bump for no reason. I've theorized it might have to do with enemies like exploding behind you and it doing something weird to the physics, but sometimes the truck will just bump on basically air for no reason. It has caused me to lose control a couple times, which is really annoying, but usually it's nothing major. Here, we're going to see Gubu Steve for the second time, and he's going to tell a great story.
Boy, have I got some stories to tell. The things I've seen, the stuff I've done. It's gonna book it would. 2 even. Maybe 3 if you use big print. There was this time when this thing happened in this place I was at. Oh boy, was that ever an adventure. This person, I forgot their name, they had something that had to do something.
King
with.
Prawn.
And I had another thing that someone else had to do stuff with.
I need to check. I'm going to open back that Australia's Big Thing page I had earlier. Is there? Yeah, there's an actual prawn here. The big prawn. So all of those landmarks are apparently based off of real Australian landmarks. They are not identically named because let's just say that the real life things, the names of the real life things lack originality.
I don't want to interrupt, but this is, if I can get this, this is very trick. Yeah, I missed it though. Yeah, so this is one of the kind of run killer areas of the first portion of the run, just because there's a lot of very small, like corner cutting things I'm doing that if you fall at any point, it's kind of bad. And the thing I tried to do a minute ago by riding up that rope saves time from having to walk around after. Really stinks that I wasn't able to get it, because I've got it pretty consistently in practice recently, but yeah, underneath is a bunch of like all those arrows and webbing area. So if you fall down, you have to go down there and pretty much walk like halfway through the level and come back again. So falling at any point is very tricky. Yeah, pretty much. There was not a single concrete description in all of Steve's story, but that's why we love him. This here is something I realized very recently you could actually do with riding up the grass there. Normally you have to kind of go around the little crook in the road to the left, but
I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have been possible on console, right?
yeah, most likely.
Because they have vastly increased the Jeep's speed.
Yeah, moves a lot faster. The handling is a bit tighter. So like turning and braking is actually a lot looser on console compared to this, which throws me off when I go back and forth sometimes, but because they control very differently. But the better speed definitely makes that possible.
Another thing that makes driving in the overworld a lot better on the PC remake is the fact that they've removed a lot of the obstacles that they've put in the console versions just to slow you down to allow the game to load the next area.
Right.
Since things loads just so fast in this version, there was no need for that.
It's really clever, and I'm glad they did that in the first place. It's annoying to drive around them. They're basically just barriers on the road. But it did make it so that way you never actually had to stop and load anything while moving in the overworld. And you can see when you're driving in the distance, you can see that trees kind of like grow from nothing into full-size trees as you get closer. Which is a pretty cool way for them to cut back on like the visual stuff a little bit until you get close. So there's a couple missions like this, using either helicopter or sub, where you have to pick up pieces and drop them off. They all have the same set location every time, so I'm picking them up in the order that is best for, like, they're always trying to always have there be a piece very close to where I'm dropping one of them off. Like that one ends in the middle, there's no piece that would be near it, so I grab that one last, things like that.
By the way, I came to the realization that you don't do the Bushfire mission in person, right?
We do not. Nope, we cut that out recently. I know. It's fitting. It would be fitting, rather.
Yeah, I'm thinking you might want to do it.
I was considering it, but the very last mission of the run is effectively the same thing, where we're putting out fires in a house in a forest and dumping water on it. Okay, I'll think about it. Yeah, I'll touch on that a bit later on. There was a very recent, like 2 or 3 months ago, big routing change during the third set of missions due to something that was not possible on console, and we basically accidentally discovered here in PC. But it'll make more sense to explain it when I'm closer.
Has someone written a program to solve those puzzles optimally? There aren't really that many runners for this game, and
yeah.
I don't think any of the runners want to put the effort into doing that. Plus, I don't think the puzzles are that complex
No,
either.
they're not.
To
It's
a point where like you're pretty confident that you have an optimal route.
yeah, like there's only 6, I think. They always are in the same spot, so it's pretty easy to just try one during a run. And if it results in having to move awkwardly at all, just try a different one instead.
Also, shoutouts to Gator Wrestling.
Yes. Because we're just tagging them and putting them back in the water, but they are definitely like wrestling them when I drop them onto the platform. This mission's very annoying, just because the placement of, like, dropping the crocs over this thing can be very, very picky sometimes. Just due to the fact that it's moving and I'm moving at the same time. It's very rare that I do one of these without having to, like, float back over it again for a second, slowly.
I think gators are crocs. I look at the
Yes.
picture and I'm seeing
Crocs.
a gator, so, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they call them crocs in the game, but I feel like I've had that asked before, and I'm pretty sure they might actually be alligators. I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you what the difference is off the top of my head. And yeah, there's a lot of options you could immediately rule out. Like the pieces in the very bottom left versus the bottom right, it would never make sense to grab them one after another, those type of things. Usually when you drop a piece off, there's only one, maybe two pieces that are near it.
Yeah.
So it's
So
more,
it's
it's
not
more
really-
like, yeah.
It's not really ordering 6 things. It's like sometimes 2 things go back to back, and there's not really, like, it's not 100% sure that that's going to be the solution. But when one piece is the only close slot that is close to that piece is that piece, then those 2 segments go back to back necessarily. Otherwise, you'd have to make a big detour for something else. And
Yeah. It's
in the
more
end,
like,
it probably takes it down from 6 to maybe 3 or 4 groups of 2 or something like that. Plus
Yeah.
the logic that Phoenix mentioned earlier, where the last piece was actually the one that he dropped right in the middle, which had nothing around it.
yeah, it's more like there's one overarching good way to get them, and the one you're starting from is just determining where in that order you're starting from, pretty much.
On one hand, they're more likely to be crocs. On the other hand, you're a tiger.
Yes, Tasmanian
A
tiger.
Tasmanian tiger.
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah, I don't know much about them, but they definitely do exist, I'm pretty sure.
And the Tasmanian tiger is not actually a tiger. It's just like every other Tasmanian thing. They're actually just weird things living in Australia that have no relative to what they're named after.
So here's where we're going to see the thermal bunyip finally. It's kind of slow. It's not the slowest thing, but there's a few spots here where I'm going to hop out of it because it's faster to walk as tie. Comes in handy for putting out fires that are blocking the way like this. There's also a lot of very small things here and there in this level that I'm doing that make this another one of the kind of big run killer type of levels, including this right here. Oh, if I actually get it, let me take my time to do it. There we go. So we call them railing jumps, courtesy of Nitroff here.
Hi.
So normally if you just jump against those ladders, he can't get quite enough height to go on top of them, so he ends up having to climb them or ledge grab, which is slow. But realize that you could land on the railings right next to it, and that gives you enough height to get over them, and it makes the movement very smooth. Problem is they're a very, very thin surface to land on, so it's very easy to miss or just not land on them at all, or just fall right off. There's a couple quick ones right in a row here that are very satisfying. My game's not lagging, which is good. I was doing practice before this, my game was lagging, and it was messing up a lot of my jumps here, but it's behaving a lot better this time. Here, just cutting a couple more corners by doing some early jumps here to get up on the railings.
Strangely enough, on the jump that happened just a little earlier, the railing is so wide, so you'd think that a railing jump would be easy there, but for some reason that railing is also the hardest to land on.
I don't think it's possible at all, actually. I haven't tried too extensively, but I think it just doesn't allow you to land on it.
You can
Here.
land on those tiny railings, but not the fat.
Here I'm using a visual cue of sorts. Nice, first try. So when you notice that when you throw the boomerang, they kind of come back at an arc angle, sorta. So you can take advantage of that to sometimes hit items or buttons that are in the distance by shooting the boomerang at a certain angle, so that way it hits the button on the way back. That's, I think, the only time that's used, at least this run. And it's really nice that there's a visual cue on the ceiling I can use for it, because otherwise it's very annoying to line up properly. Do another railing jump or two here. That was very smooth. That's one of my favorite parts of the level.
Yeah, railing jump makes for really cool platforming here. Really smooth movement. When you compare it to having to stop at each ladder just to grab the top of the ledge, and I'm just glad they're a thing.
So here we have the second boss. We dub it the best fight because it is the best fight. There's no sugarcoating it. It's very slow, I'll be honest. There's pretty much nothing you can do to speed it up all that much, other than just avoiding getting hit. He takes 9 hits, and if every hit was as quick as that last one, it wouldn't be too bad. The problem is after the second or third phase kicks in, he does some additional movement in between hits that take longer.
Yeah, so if you guys have any donations you wanted to make, I'll be able to read it. I'll have plenty of time to read them.
Also, you can notice the 3 out of 3 button counter is still there. That should not be there.
Yeah, that's not supposed to be there at all.
And
have you seen that before?
It's always there, actually. I was going to say that it lingers after the fight as well for a couple seconds on the hub, usually.
Huh.
And then eventually it kind of goes away. I don't know if the game just kind of checks programming and code and it realizes, hey, that shouldn't be here. But
For some reason, that's the first time I see this.
I feel like it might have to do with skipping cutscenes.
That might
I know
make
in
sense,
the first game on PC, you can actually soft lock if you skip cutscenes too fast in the hub area, because it puts you into this limbo state. That could be the same here. I don't know. Yeah, subtle thing to notice, he always takes 8 steps after he forms. So I'm doing that, making him take 8 steps, and then trying to get early hits on him. Because the hitbox on his mouth that spawns a little bit early, so you can kind of jump and hit him in the head before he totally finishes his roaring animation. Another small thing I try to do when I'm here, just for fun, is try to break as much of the houses and wooden planks as possible. Just gives you something to do. On a good day, you can break all of it. So now, third phase, same thing with the hits, except he does this bouncing first, which comes in handy for trying to break the rest of the stuff. Probably not going to actually get it all done this time, but pretty sure he himself spawns in the same spots every time. I've never really paid too close attention, but the areas he spawns here, they slightly vary in the middle, but at the very end of the game, you do a rematch with these first 2 bosses, and thankfully he only takes 2 hits then, instead of all 9, because that would be terrible if you had to do this twice.
I just can't keep focusing on this. This boss is just so boring.
In a sense, it's nice. I like that it happens right after one of the trickier levels to actually do really efficiently. You use a nice 4-minute break before the rest of the run kicks in. This is essentially the halfway point. It's not really, because the rest of the missions, there's more missions than the rest of the game, so it takes a bit longer, but as far as story progression, this is the halfway mark.
One more hit?
Yep. And I think I'm going to be able to break everything except for that one boat over there, which, oh well. Oh, and a couple things here. It's fine. Doesn't make a difference. Yeah, so you see the 3 out of 3 should still be there for a couple seconds here. Yeah, it is. Very weird.
Interesting.
There was one time where it was like worse than that, where actually if I checked the mission sheet, it would show that that boss hadn't been finished yet, and I was in this in-between state, and it did fix itself, but it took like good 10 seconds. And I thought it had killed the run I was doing, because it was basically soft-locked. Only had that happen once, though. Sub-Bunny Epic. Completely forgot which one I was buying for a second there. And I told myself I wasn't going to do this earlier, but I'm going to do it anyways. So that is getting the infra ring, which is necessary to talk to Steve one more time. It takes away a little bit of speed because normally you wouldn't get any of this stuff, but actually I forgot the Frosty ring. I knew I forgot something.
Oh,
See, I
no.
I knew that threw me off, but I was gonna say, like, I'm one boomerang short here. So, yeah, so this is what happens when you have recent route changes that you don't remember too well.
I would have told you, but I don't know the route.
Okay, there we go. So the route changes here, we used to get the Mega Ring at that point, which is pretty useful to have. It's essentially the normal boomerang, except it homes in on enemies, which is really useful when there's like a lot of enemies you need to kill, like for the ninja missions, because there's 3 of them. But part of the route change involves requiring the Frosty Ring for one of these missions now, and that doesn't leave us with enough opals to still buy the Mega Ring. Now, because I talked to Steve twice in the run so far, I could still have technically gotten the Mega Ring, but oh god. That's how easy it is for the truck to get knocked over. So normally I would still be able to get the Mega Ring now because of talking to Steve, but I want to talk to Steve one more time, and I need the infra ring to do that. So I'm sacrificing a little bit of time in order to talk to him for comedic effect, because it's worth it. This is a common trend where at the start of these sets of missions is kind of just a lot of driving to actually get to the missions to start with, just because there's really no other way to get around on the map. This set of missions starts with 2 missions over here on the beach that both use the sub-Bunyip, and it's the only time it's used in the run. I'm going to swim, because it's a bit faster than walking, especially since I can go in a straight line here. Try and get close to the cave entrance. So I think I actually mentioned earlier, one of the mission types is like underwater and you're rescuing people from sharks, so that's this one. But you'll notice there's some like green barrier things on the ground that show up every once in a while. They're meant to kind of guide your way through the ocean here. The thing is, they didn't really make the invisible barriers very tight. So you can go really far out of the boundaries from the green lights, and I use that to cut a lot of corners here. Where it really looks like I'm kind of swimming into nowhere, but if you were actually following the lights, it would be a little more like an actual linear path.
And it's really going back and forth, so once you know, back and forth, left and right,
Yeah.
actually. So it's not really that hard to orient yourself. It's just once you start to get good, it's a matter of optimizing the angle you take after each corner.
And believe it or not, I actually use some of the seaweed on the ground here as visual cues, so I know what angle to actually swim at. So it actually goes in as much of a straight line as I can. I'm usually off by a little bit, but
Also, no need for a refuel here
yeah.
at all. You've barely
I don't think
used
I've
it.
ever gotten the refuel in the sub, like ever, actually, even casually. They make it way too easy.
Sharks are tigers too. Sure, I can get by that. Everything is tiger.
That's good. I had been wondering about how much of like the names of things in this game are like stereotypical or like actually proper sounding Australian things. When I told a friend that the oil rig's name was the Woolly Woolly Oil Rig, he was like, yeah, sounds about right. So... And you got the beach is Wobbegong Bay, I think. Everything else sounds pretty normal. But yeah, so this is very similar to the helicopter mission earlier with picking up the pieces, except it's underwater with the sub, and instead of starting at the very bottom left piece, I'm starting with the bottom right. Same idea otherwise. It's an underwater sea lab, I believe, that we're repairing. Yeah, so if you've seen runs of Taiwan, I honestly actually don't know all that much about it, because I know a lot of newer strats have been found, but it's a bit more trick heavy. It's very level based, instead of this like kind of larger overworld with a mission system type of game. So it's a bit more trick heavy, a lot more tight platforming. Whereas this game is a lot more based on like optimizing your movement in very small ways throughout all these little various mini games and small missions and vehicles. So at any point during all these, you can just be progressively losing 2 to 3 seconds in each mission, just if you're not playing totally optimally. At least at the level I'm playing at. Because from my personal history, I started trying to route some of this game back in 2015. I really didn't take running it actually seriously until the beginning of this year, though. Motivation to speedrunning is really annoying and hard to come by, but I finally was like, I want to do stuff with this game. So I finished some routing, improved a couple of routes, and basically just did what I could with it. There's not a whole lot of people who run it, which is part of why I want to do this, because I want to bring more attention to it. It's really fun, and I would love to have people actually discover it and help improve it.
I think the arrival of the PC remakes make speedrunning this game series much more attractive, at least to me.
Yeah. So there's 10 categories for it. Technically, it depends. I mean, it's 5 on PC and then 5 on console, because the routes do vary. Not in too many major ways, but like at the very start of the game when I did that jump where I mentioned there's a fence on console, small things like that that slightly affect the order you would do things in console. So they're different enough that we have them separate. I guess I can give shoutouts to Rob the Gamer. Did a ton of work back when the game was first starting out as a run in like 2014. He did a lot of the early routing and a lot of early runs. Most of the categories stayed dormant for a while. Americus came around. I don't know if that's his full username or not, but he came around and he did a lot of work with 90%. That was a very difficult run to beat. I'm trying to get him back into it, because he's very good at the game. So here, it's essentially, we're just hitting 8 buttons throughout it. I actually do not remember what the story is, because I never watch these cutscenes, but I know it's some sort of tourist area, and I think there's people trapped or something, and we have to free them by hitting the buttons. This cycle is basically impossible to make. I haven't quite worked out if it's like global or not, but every time I get to it, no matter what, I always have to wait. It's a good cycle on those things. Normally, those things can be very annoying if they're spinning really fast. It's very hard to dodge them then, but they slow down. Try and get this jump. This is a neat little jump you can do off this button. Got it. Nice. That took me like 5 tries earlier for some reason. And the very last button's over here, which is conveniently right by the entrance to the level. I really kind of do wish, the only downside to talking to Steve during this is it's going to be hard to really tell how strong of a run it actually is, because we don't normally do that in any percent, but so far it's been pretty strong. I haven't made any particularly noticeable mistakes other than very minor things, like forgetting to buy a boomerang. That's actually not very minor. I take that back. Other than that, though, it's been good. And that all could change here. Because we have the worst thing in the entire game. It stinks that no matter what category you do, you're stuck doing this mission. I hate it, because this is a very fun area to do. You can see the map's really kind of unique looking, with a lot of branching areas. There's a lot of collectibles that are fun to collect in the full completion versions of the game. But at the end of the day, you still have to do this one mission at the end of it that we just call Crocs, because that's all it is. Instead of Croc wrestling like earlier, it's Croc herding.
Just Australian things.
It'll probably speak for itself once I start why it's annoying. But
Unless you just get the godlike.
that would be cool.
herding.
I mean, the one I just did right before this was pretty good, so. Yeah, so you get a 10-minute timer. You don't need it, but. So you get all these crocodiles, you're herding them over towards here.
Yeah, so those are definitely Crocs.
The problem with them is their movement gets very, very glitchy when they get close to each other. So, in a lot of other categories, I'd have the Mega Ring here, and I would use the Mega Ring to kind of get them all up to the front at once. But that usually ends up not being the best option because they start bumping into each other. And again, like I said, they get very glitchy. They stop actually listening, like when you hit them with the boomerang sometimes. Like that, he just turned around for no reason, even though I told him to go forward. In an ideal situation, you'd get like a anywhere from like a 9:15 to a 9:25 on the timer here. So this one's actually not too bad, except this one's being a little annoying now. I really haven't spent a ton of time actually focusing on this mission specifically, because you cannot repeat it. A lot of missions you can repeat if you go back to them on the map, this one you can't. So it makes it very hard to practice, very hard to figure out strats that actually work good for it. So most of the time I'll just try new things if I think they seem like a good idea, and I'll try them during a run. You could do it on a emulator, but I can't guarantee that the Crocs actually work the same on like a GameCube emulator versus the PC version here. Yeah, so that could vary. That's like the problem with my PB right now is that those Crocs there are very good. So like you have to match that now. But that was plenty good enough for now for me for this run especially.
Second biggest pie in the world.
So we come back here and we have ninjas again. So it's the same actors, and I guess they were insisting that yes, they're actually under attack this time. So came back. I'm gonna try and help them again. If I had the Mega Ring, which I've mentioned a couple times now, I kind of wish I did take it now, but it's worth it for Boo Boo Steve. So it makes this area a bit easier, just because this is a very large area. These boomerangs are very hard, very bad at hitting moving targets, whereas the Mega Ring would home in right on them.
So you might be wondering what's all that fuss about Boo Boo Steve. Well, he's just the best character in the game, in the whole series probably. And so much so that there is an actual Steve % category.
Absolutely.
And it is, as far as Phoenix is concerned, the best category in the game, isn't it?
Yes, and not even just for the obvious reasons, which would be Steve, but there's other minor things, like essentially Steve % is just any % with a focus on talking to Steve. You don't do the final boss, you don't do a lot of side things, you just focus on talking to all 10 times that Steve appears, which usually results in actually a pretty unique route where you skip certain missions that you wouldn't ever normally skip otherwise, and you do things like there's the second set of missions here is a volcano that we do in Steve %, even though it's very slow in terms of any %. But it's a cool area that you end up doing in Steve %, which is cool to show off. And just other minor things about the route that are good.
Does it skip that one unavoidable level you mentioned?
I don't think it gets... Yeah, it stops at Never Never, so it stops before it gets to that point.
So are we talking about?
Oh, I thought that was you asking. I thought you meant the slow thing at the end with the lifter.
Yeah, no. I knew that Steve Person skipped that. I'm not sure which
Yeah.
mission we're talking about.
I don't
here.
remember which one that would be. I think it might have been one of the driving missions I was talking about, possibly, where it's just you're stuck doing it no matter what. Yeah, if you're talking about that, then yeah, there's really no way around doing those. So this is the area of the game that had a lot of route changes recently. I'll explain it a little bit into detail after. Oh, the Crocs I just did. I actually don't remember. I haven't done Steve Percent long enough to remember the exact route, but I think it might. Actually, you know, come to think, I know it doesn't, because there's a Steve that's actually right before him, right before that part of the map. So, God, this is so hard to aim when you're on a spinning thing. This is a terrible idea. I'm just gonna wait till I get on this thing.
And yes, we're doing this just to get a Steve. This is all time waste
It's
for
worth
our
it.
enjoyment.
We get to learn his secret chant.
Only Steve Sorrison knows the Google chant can be here.
Hey.
Google, Google, Google.
Yep.
Shaka waka waka wo. Stick a finger in your ear and yell at Google loud and clear. I guess you know the chant now. Well, you can stay.
Stick a
Just be
finger
quiet, okay?
in your ear
Don't tell anyone I
and
gave
yell
you
at
the
Google loud and clear.
So now we know the Stegosaurus chant. So for people who did play this game on console and either tried to 100% it, or they know just know the game well, you would probably remember this mission because it's probably the worst. It's actually worse than Crocs, honestly, on console. It's better now, but you have this beetle that's chasing you. It's very high polygons, you can tell. The problem on console is the camera is facing the opposite direction, similar to like Crash Bandicoot. And that's bad because the camera is also at a bad angle enough that you can't actually see what's coming in front of you. You're basically forced to memorize this entire layout. Because if you hit more than like 2 or 3 things in a close time range, the beetle will get you. It's absolutely terrible. But they listened on PC and they turned the camera around, so it's actually reasonable.
As you can tell, jumping is a lot faster than just grinding your whole way through.
Yeah, especially
You
going
get
like uphill.
massive speed boosts.
I've always wondered if it was just me seeing that, but I'm glad, I'm glad
No,
it's more
it's
noticeable.
massive. You probably saved like upwards of 20 seconds through the whole thing. Wouldn't be surprised.
So the next mission is the one and only time we actually use the Frosty Ring, which it's a good thing I didn't forget it, because that would be very bad. It's a long way to drive, but we have to rescue this alien. And I try to say that with quotations, because they try and play it off like it's not an alien, but we know it's an alien.
No, they're not aliens. There is nothing indicating that it would be an alien. Nothing.
Nothing at all. So the Frosty Ring is needed to cool these platforms down so you can actually land on them. You can also rotate these so you can actually jump on them at a slightly better angle. So what I'll start to explain a little bit about the route thing without going too much into detail, but essentially you get on the call sheet that I mentioned earlier. You can see it here, this list of missions. In every part of the game, like I consider it like set 1, set 2, set 3, and set 4. I mentioned they all have a boss at the end and they all have a specific set of missions that always have to be done. The game always allows you to skip one of them in each set, which comes in handy for any percent routing. We would, for example, in the second set, this volcano area, we skip. It's not really for any particular reason in terms of like not having materials you need, but it's just long. So it allows us to do things like that and skip whatever the longest mission is in each set.
And that was not an air jump, by the way.
No.
That was an invisible platform there.
Yes. So if I had thought about it, I would have been able to show it with the infraring. The infraring lets you see invisible platforms that show up from time to time. Sometimes they're just invisible boxes with photos on them, which are collectibles, or just platforms like that. I don't like that my laptop just went to sleep, so I can't see chat now, but... But yeah, so you're allowed to skip one mission per set, which that alone already is useful for routing. It comes in handy. But the game also sometimes will allow you to do quote-unquote hidden missions that aren't listed on the call sheet, but they're still in the game. As far as I'm concerned, they're not intended to count. But on PC, at least in the case of this and one later in the game, you're allowed to do them, and they'll substitute for one of the other missions that are normally on the map. That Stone Beetle thing I just did with the Crash Bandicoot style thing, that's one of them. So we realized very recently that, hey, that's actually possible on PC. It'll substitute. So we started to do that, and it cut out 2 other shorter missions that are in this third set of stuff, which are just out of the way on the map. So it makes it about 30 to 40 seconds faster, is what it ends up saving in terms of driving time. So this is Fluffy. We saw her at the beginning of the game. This is probably my favorite fight in the game, I would say, just because it has a cool strat at the end. When you hit her, she gets healed by these robots, so I have to go and destroy all the robots before I can actually deal damage that actually matters to her.
Nice comment in chat. You can tell it's an American runner when they run the wrong side of the road.
Yeah. You're gonna have to say chat stuff until I get back to the hub area, because I do not have time to type my password into my laptop.
Don't worry about it. I get you covered.
Yeah, so what we're essentially doing at the end here, which is pretty fun, and one of the better, cooler strats, is we can get a double hit on her, which saves time, because normally when you punch her, she'll either fall in the water or land on the platform here, and it'll take her like 5 seconds to actually stand up. But you can do this, where you hit her here, destroy that robot before it has a chance to heal her, if I can hit it accurately, and hit her a second time here. And by the time I actually get over here, she's already back on the platform to be hit for the 3rd time. And 4. That's pretty much, yeah, it's pretty much free on PC. On console, she does a lot of really, really wonky movement, and I haven't been able to actually figure out how to consistently get that double hit to work, but... So you'll notice right away, I already talked to Julius, who's a little koala NPC who kind of guides you through the game. He's like the genius of the town, who inventor, all that. This is me trying to walk forward while reaching over and typing a password in. There we go. I messed up the password once, it's fine. So...
Typing a password one-handed is not nice.
So now we actually do have enough opals to both get the last required bunyip, which is terrible because it's slow. And we can also get the mega ring finally, which will come in handy for a couple of missions. Could do some funny movement here when you're on these platforms here. Couldn't get it. If you walk just on the edge of it, Ty will kind of like stutter in place while he's moving. Well, so it's not in place, but it just looks kind of funny. But yeah, so technically there are 3 driving missions that are similar to this in this 4th set of missions, but thankfully we were able to skip 2 of them, or both of them, which is good. One is skipped using the normal method that the game already allows you to do by skipping 1 mission per set. And then there's also another one of those hidden type missions that we're able to use to substitute for it. And it's weird that those are the only 2 in the game that works for, because there are some other missions earlier in the game that could be done similarly, but they don't actually substitute for things, which stinks, because it would definitely help the route a bit. guy behind me. He's tailgating. It's really dumb when they do that, because you can't really do much about it. And they just drain away your health. So this is probably, I would say, my favorite part of the run.
The Never Never.
It's a very fun area. It's in pretty much every category. It's my favorite part of it.
It's a really big area with a lot to do.
Yep. So I'm going to be doing 4 missions when I get in here. So, like that area I just came from earlier with the Beetle, that had 2 missions, and that was quick enough as it was. Now there's 4 in here I'll be doing very quick, which just makes it extremely efficient. It also has the best music.
So I can't hear it.
This cycle is just barely able to be made if you do that jump there. Also going to do a couple of little jumps here, taking advantage of the sand being a little bit higher to the left here.
Is
Jump
there
there.
any big run killers / skips in this game like in Taiwan?
I mean, there's run killer areas like certain minigames like Crocs earlier that are very annoying and very hard to do consistently well. Those can definitely go bad. You could lose 30 seconds doing that type of thing. Also, when you're playing at a top level, you need to keep your movement optimized, like pretty much 24/7 in these smaller mini games, or time saves or time loss will start to add up very quick. There's not really any skips per se. It's really a very solid game. There was one out of bounds that was possible on console that seems to not be possible with the physics on PC. But even then, it wasn't something that actually was useful in the run. So for the most part, it's really just a very movement-based type of game. It's not very broken. There's not many big skips and glitches, which I like personally. I prefer that. So here we get these platforms again. I'm trying to do this without actually like moving them, because like earlier you can hit them to change their direction, but you don't need to here, with a couple of good boosted jumps. And you'll notice I didn't start swimming right away there, which is definitely intentional, and I'm going to actually do something similar here for the same reason. So what happens is if you're swimming underwater and a cutscene triggers, he will do another diving animation as if he was like just then going underwater. It's kind of weird, you'd have to see it to totally get what I mean, but it's slow is what matters. And so there, if I were to go underwater and then the cutscene for finishing that mission triggers, then it would make him do another dive animation underwater, and it would cost a couple seconds.
Now time to hunt dinosaurs to
Yes.
extinction.
Yep. This is the reason why they're extinct. It's people who run Tai 2. It's their fault. Which is pretty much just me. So it's basically my fault. Yeah. This guy takes forever. He is very, very slow. It's just basically an escort mission. Keep him safe from the dinosaurs. Also
Dennis
notice,
face.
the second they touch water, they die. So that might also play a part in their extinction. There is actually times where they'll walk into the water on their own, and I'll watch them actually just die. And I'm like, oh, that explains it. So I wouldn't really call this a sequence break, but I am going to definitely save some time here. So I'm going to wait for him to cross a certain point here, which is my cue to hop out and start swimming. So the idea is to get back over to the gate area here fast enough so that way his cutscene doesn't trigger and do the thing I mentioned earlier with the underwater animation. But I also don't want to go too early because he'll despawn. So I have sort of a cue based on just where he's actually standing, and use that as when to start swimming. Worst case, you just lose a couple seconds, but it's pretty nice to be able to not have that happen. So this is the hidden mission in the area. So this is a bird. Basically, just copy what he does. He spits out a couple colors. The colors are always the same. It's just the order they appear in here is what what changes. It's at random. It's not usually that big a deal. But this is a good order, actually. You can see why that's convenient to do, because you can immediately just fall off the edge and you're back at the exit here. So that takes not even like 15 to 20 seconds to do, really, and it's a very quick one. You're already in the area, and that's the hidden mission that helps substitute, so we don't have to do any more of those long driving things.
So you have to develop on the answer from earlier. The kind of skips that you'll have in this game aren't actual skill-based skips, aren't things that could kill runs by executing them poorly. It's just doing things a little differently, like changing the missions that you're doing for something that wouldn't normally be part of an any person playthrough, just because of the way the game programs mission checking.
I've always said it that's similar, that pretty much all of the major speed from the category comes from the routing itself, which is basically free time zero for anyone who actually uses the route pretty much, but that's why the rest of the run is so movement based. And this is where the Megarang comes in handy for these missions. You'll notice that we've done the missions for these ninjas twice now, and both times they insisted, "What are you doing? These guys are part of our set, why are you attacking them?" And then 10 minutes later we come back and they call for help again, so we just keep going back. But you get a plot twist in that one, actually, where you get to the end of it and they actually say, "Oh, thanks for coming, Ty. That's great. We'll use that for our movie." Because they knew that if they called for help again and you come and defeat the ninjas, they can then use that for the movie as action footage. Just great joke. I'm glad they at least try to add some humor to the game and the story like that a little bit.
I mean, I don't feel like the game takes itself very seriously.
Nah. Also, we just passed by the top banana.
Yes, of course. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I'm ready.
He's very excited about this.
This is the slowest mission in the game.
But he's very excited anyways.
I'm
for
very
a
excited
very good
about
reason.
this. Because you will be able to enjoy hips for about 5 minutes.
The hips.
Look at them.
Nothing else stands out.
Have you ever seen someone move their hips like that? No, they don't lie, I tell you.
So this is always scary here. This one frill behind me that I leave alive. Because he does that. Where he basically just kind of stops caring. It's always scary because sometimes he'll follow a little bit longer than that, and I'll always get worried that he's not going to stop and that he'll actually hit me. That has never actually happened, but it's always scary anyways. Yeah, there's really very little you can do about speeding this up. This is another one of those things where, like, you could theoretically try out getting these box things in different orders, but that requires having to do this mission a lot of times, and I'm not doing that, so. Also, unlike a lot of missions in the game, you cannot repeat this one similar to Crocs, so it just figures the ones that you would actually benefit the most from doing a lot to practice and try things out on are the two missions you can't do that for. Yeah, there is, but at least for this one, it would make sense to do that. But actually, no. Come to think of it, yeah, you probably could do that. Honestly, I mean, I've messed with Cheat Engine a little bit. I wouldn't even know where to begin and how to find, like, how to actually get into memory values for levels and whatnot. But it could be probably worked out, I'd imagine. So The only things I really do here is just try to throw these things from as far away as possible. There's a couple very subtle cues for it. Also, this... Oh, he's not there. Huh. That's Frill. He usually ends up on the middle of the road, actually, when you do that. That's really weird. Oh, okay. I get it. I get what you mean. Yeah. You could. And honestly, I would be in favor of that. I would be on board for making that a rule.
Oh, okay.
No.
So something to be said about the categories in this game.
Oh yeah, I was gonna touch on that at one point, but it never actually came up.
The agreed upon better 100% category is actually a 95% category in which you get 96% because it's faster to do that. And the all missions category does not do all missions.
Yeah, we need to fix that at some point. Yeah, so this, like I said earlier, there's 5 categories, both on PC and console, for 10 total. I have the record in all of them right now, which I'm more than welcome to have some competition, because it would encourage me to do more runs. But we have 80%, which is self-explanatory. The routes are very similar on both console and PC. Pretty much all of them are, really, but the 60% I mentioned earlier, which is kind of a meme, but really it's unironically good. Then there's all missions, which you'd think would be self-explanatory, but I think it's 38 missions total, I think, in the game. And there's one quote-unquote hidden, another one of those hidden type missions where you have to use the Infraring to kill 25 spies throughout the game. The issue is that that requires having a very similar route to 100%, because you need to buy a lot of extra boomerangs. So when the category was made, people just determined that we just don't need to do that extra spy mission, because it would make it pretty much indistinguishable from 95 or 100%. At that point, it would be basically the same thing, just getting a couple less collectibles here and there. So all missions technically doesn't do all missions, but it does all the missions that actually like matter on like the mission call sheet and the storyline. Then you have 95%, which is essentially 100% without a bunch of grinding at the end, because you don't need every single boomerang in order to get all the collectibles. And in order to afford getting all the boomerangs, you have to do a very tedious 20-minute long grinding session for opals. And we just didn't really want to do that, so we separated 95 and 100%. It becomes 96% because we do get one of those extra boomerangs, just because it makes it a little bit faster even though it's not necessary. And then 100% is exactly that. It's just that, a couple slight route changes here and there to get more opals along the way, and then grinding at the end of the game.
So 96%, which is the boomerang that you get that you're not forced to
Mega
get?
Ring.
Okay, the Mega Ring.
Yep. Oh yeah, and to point out too, yes, we're putting out the Bushfires here. Or the house fires rather, but it's the whole forest. So that's the second to last mission, so we're actually getting close to the end, but there's still probably a good 45 minutes left at least. I don't know how long this takes, but it doesn't make sense to drive all the way back to town for the final mission when you can just exit level, so we do that there. I will say so again, when it's a bit closer to actually doing time, you'll know because it's the final boss fight, and I'll just say when I'm about to do the last hits. We have a level leading up to it, kind of similar to the oil rig earlier, where there's a big level leading up to the final fight. Except you're in a massive mech suit now, and it's very fun to control. Originally I was kind of annoyed that they didn't have like any platforming in the final level here. The first game is kind of similar. You have kind of a bit of a platforming thing before you actually do the final boss, and then the final boss itself is really underwhelming. But this game handles it well. The action actually fits pretty well. Yeah, so 90% ends up being like 46%, I think it was, but if you do what I'm doing now with getting the Ink Ring and Mega Ring due to getting Steve, then it becomes 47, so even that slightly varies, but that's only because I'm talking to Steve here when I normally wouldn't. So here's the rematch with the bosses. Again, not very long. I actually don't know what it is.
Thank God this does not take another 9 hits.
Yes. He does take forever to do this, though. He just kind of sits there and slowly crumbs back up. So I'm going to lead him over this way, just because this is the next area I'm going to, so. That was a really early hit, actually. That's kind of interesting. Also, give credit again to Nitroff for realizing you could do this with just jumping all the way up those steps. I never thought to try it. And he had already been doing it and realized it was possible to make it all the way up. I don't know that I ever actually introduced you, honestly, in the call. You are Nitroff.
And I'm not a runner of this game. I'm
Nope.
just moral support here.
Yes. And he knows the game probably the best of all the people I know online, pretty much.
I'm actually one of the few people who knew of this game as well as along with Taiwan. Like, I played both games as a kid. Fun fact, after I played both games as a kid, that was not at my own place. That was on my friend's PS2.
Oh, really?
And I actually completely forgot what the names or even the existence of the game at some point. And then probably 8 years ago, something like that, I suddenly remembered that one game on PS2 where you were something, a tiger, I don't know,
Yeah.
that launched boomerangs, and like there was those vivid memories, the underwater levels, the forest levels in Taiwan, and then the driving in Tai 2 and stuff like that. And it took me a good 2 months to finally learn the name of the game again and play it again. And I'm glad I did, because those are really fun games.
Yep, so this is the final boss. There's 4 phases to it. As you can see, he's not losing very much health every hit. They're consistent. At least this phase is consistent. He always bounces the same amount of times in between hits. Always does the same set of things. Time will be coming within a minute. We get 2 more hits on him in this phase. And the 4th phase is pretty much like non-existent. He just kind of runs around in a circle screaming in fear and you hit him 3 times.
4th phase is just a joke.
Yes. Alright, so we got this. So I'm going to do this here. Time will be very soon. And time. Let's get back here to the main menu, hub area again. Curious. So what was that for a time, actually?
It's still going up.
Okay.
That was a 117,
Okay.
23, something like that.
Okay, that's good. Especially with all the Steves there. Talking to Steves there, take anywhere from, I think, up to 2 minutes roughly, so that's effectively probably close to like a mid 115. Maybe a higher 115, which is like a minute off PB, which is pretty good. I'm happy with that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that went pretty well. So I'm going to show off a quick thing here since I mentioned that.
Oh yeah.
Yes. This is something that doesn't have any actual uses in the run itself, or any of the runs really, but it's just a kind of fun movement technique that's cool to do.
To be fair, there are a few uses in 100%. It's
Yeah.
just slightly inconsistent.
Yeah. So you get this boomerang called the Warperang. It allows you to grab onto these type of hooks and things like that and swing from them. The thing is, they carry momentum very, very strongly. So if you start to use the warp ring and then start approaching one of the rings after, when it pulls you in and you let go, Ty will carry that momentum and he'll go flying really far sometimes. So I'm going to do it a couple times and try and get some big launches out of it.
The unupgraded version of this boomerang is the Lasharang, and because of that, this trick has been cleverly named the Lashalanche.
Even though it's with the warp ring. It's perfect.
I mean, the warp launch doesn't really sound as
Yeah.
good, so...
I can just give a couple attempts at trying to actually get a really big launch out of this. If I can actually get back up here.
The Lasharang does allow for some kinds of launches, but because it has a much lower range, the launches are much weaker and not useful at all.
There we go. I was having trouble getting back up here. Yeah. Give one more try at this and then move on from it. I have a couple clips of it that are pretty cool. You can get ridiculously long launches. Like, you can get shot all the way to the end of... Oh, that's not what I meant to do. You can get shot all the way over to the edge of the map, pretty much. Yeah, so theoretically it could be used in runs whenever there's spots like this. It would just be incredibly hard to control. It happened by accident, I discovered. It was another runner who was doing this in a cave area, and he accidentally did that and got shot way up to the ceiling. Okay. Yeah, I think that pretty much does it for me. You get the idea.
Congratulations again on the run.
Yeah, that was very good. I'm happy with that.
And
So
to everyone still watching, have a nice marathon.